Alrighty, so this will be a little conversation about varieties and cultivars and some of the pros and cons that we see in the industry with the number of different types of plants that are available. As always, if you prefer to have not a video, then you can go to Carmen and you can download the PDF or just the original PowerPoint if you would like. So think about the term variety. What does that word mean to you? Change, differences? It's pretty darn close. The same for plants. So we tend to think of the word variety as a natural change. In other words, if you're walking in the woods and you see that most of the dogwoods are flowering white and this one random one is flowering pink, well, you didn't breed that or people didn't breed that. That is a natural change. Versus cultivar, a cultivated variety. Can you see how we've kind of mashed the words cultivated and variety together to come up with cultivar? So cultivated variety, that's a human-made change in the plant. We bred for a leaf difference, a flower color difference, a size difference, maybe disease resistance or something along those lines. So we've bred and we maintain the change in that plant. What can we change? We can literally change anything. We could change the flower color. We could change the size, the shape, insect or disease resistance, some sort of environmental resistance. So we can change things that we can see in addition to things that you actually cannot see, like environmental resistance, drought resistance, or disease resistance. You can't see that change until that plant doesn't get that disease or that insect. These changes need to be protected under U.S. law. Plant breeders want to make sure that they protect the money that they spend improving plants. So laws are created so growers and breeders are willing to continually work to improve crops. So we have agreements in this country that if you've patented something, then somebody else can't produce that plant unless you give them legal permission to do so. But this works internationally. So we agree to abide by the laws of another country, and they agree to abide by our laws when it comes to producing plants. So these websites will take you to different locations. So we'll click on this first one, and it takes us to the Plant Variety Protection Act. And I'm going to scroll down to page 9. So it's a little bit of scrolling here. I don't want you to read this whole thing. I want you to just kind of recognize that how thick this is. But what I want you to look for is right here in section 42 that if plant protection is, a plant is protectable if it's brand new, it's distinct is number 2, it is uniform, meaning it always comes true, and it's stable. So if you look through this, there's a lot of pages here, but that's basically what it boils down to, so that growers can produce something that's totally different. Now, internationally, and I'm just going to take you to this website. This is the handbook for international organizations and laws regarding plants, just again to show you that there's lots and lots of international agreements between all kinds of different countries to make sure that plants are produced and produced well, and that growers can make the money that they need. One change has happened this year. The Trump administration actually added asexual propagation to this. So it used to be that they could not be asexually propagated, so cuttings didn't count. But the fact that that's been added actually greatly expands the plants that can get protections now. So, uniform. They have to look all the same, or at least very similar. Distinct. It has to be different from other varieties that are out there. You have to prove that it's a little bit different color, or taller, or shorter, or more compact. Stable. When you breed them, they all have to come true to the same thing. And named. You have to give them a name. Usually it's a name given them by the breeder. Okay, so one of the ways growers and breeders can protect their plants is through patenting them. So if you're watching this on your own, click the one that is most interesting to you, and you will be taken to a Google site where they are showing what the patent actually looks like. Now, this isn't submitted through Google. It's obviously submitted through the U.S. Patent Office, but this will give you an idea of what it takes to put a patent together. And this is actually a very simple one relative to the corn patent. So let's go back to the corn patent. This one is far more complicated, because this particular patent also has to describe all of the other patents that might be involved in generating this particular plant. So modern corn can have anywhere from 200 to 300 patents because individual genes can be patented. So corn becomes very, very lengthy and very challenging in terms of breeding for these different characteristics. And you can see this just goes on and on and on. Again, the point is not to necessarily read those, but just to get an idea of how complicated this is. Companies that do these things hire attorneys, slews of attorneys, to make sure that they don't make mistakes on them. All right, so there's a few other terms that you might need to recognize when it comes to different types and where you might get material for breeding. An ecotype is a distinct natural population from a certain region. I'm going to show you some pictures in a second, so it'll be a little bit more obvious. Landrace, this is distinct populations from human selection. For example, if you lived in an area where there were a lot of little villages and you had subsistence farming like many countries in Africa do, each little village might have their own specific varieties that they're utilizing that are basically specific to that village. And what we are seeing nowadays are heirloom varieties that are popping up. You can even buy some of these in the stores for some cases. So let's get to a few slides as examples. So if we take a look for red maple, don't worry about this thing over here on the side. Don't worry about that. What we're looking at is the blue outlined area is all the places where red maple can be found in the country. But if you take red maples from down south and you grow them or try to grow them up north, they don't grow. Neither do their seedlings. Because even though they're the same species, they're not adapted to those conditions. They are adapted to that local ecosystem. Therefore, they are an ecotype. These are a whole bunch of different chickpeas. These are examples of land races. So each of these different chickpeas came from different villages. And you'll notice how they all look slightly different. And there are the plants growing down there in the lower right-hand corner. These are heirloom varieties of tomatoes. These are tomato types that may have been grown decades ago or even longer than that. And they're becoming popular again. Mostly this is a limited scale sort of thing. They're not usually production types, but we are seeing some heirloom tomatoes and other heirloom plants showing up in the industry more frequently. This is on the left is an heirloom geranium. On the right is a modern geranium. Notice how full and how many flowers and how big the flowers are in the modern one. But notice on the left one how colorful the leaves are. So we are seeing a resurgence of some of these older cultivars. Why would we need to breed all these different cultivars? Well, for crop plants, it really paralleled the inventions of fertilizers and pesticides. As we recognize that you can't necessarily grow the same exact corn in the same exact way in every single state, and as we were adding more fertilizers, we started breeding plants that were capable of handling that and of growing in different parts in the country. So if you see right around here, that's where the fertilizers and pesticides started happening, and you can see the number of varieties really started to increase at that point. Occasionally, if you get into breeders, you do find public cultivars and private cultivars. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Public cultivars are often held by a public agency such as a university. So OSU might have some cultivars, but they aren't available commercially. But they will make seeds or plants or cuttings available to private growers so that they can do hybridizing, versus private cultivars, which is a commercial entity doing that for profit. But how many do we need? So if you click on any of these links, no, seriously, click on the link. If we search this database of hosta, and we can show all hosta here, this particular database has 285 pages of 7,124 hostas. Really, how many of these do we need? If you're a hosta collector, you would say all of them. If you are a gardener, you might say, do I really need them all? I don't know. Another one. This is a wholesale nursery grower. And if we look at some of their stuff, let's go into availability or products. How about perennial, heuchera? Notice they don't have very many different types of varieties, but they specialize in a lot of different things for a few varieties. How many purple-leafed heucheras do we gardeners need? Again, if you're a collector, you say all of them. If you're a landscaper, all three of this, Black Beauty, Black Forest Cake, and Black Taffeta, may simply be enough. Why do you need all three of them? Maybe one of them will be enough for you. This is a trial garden, so you can see how many plants. Every group of 3 is a new cultivar. Seriously, how many pink ones do we need? How many red ones do we need? But we are trialing them to see which performs better. This is another trial garden. This is an annual trial garden. And companies will send their plants all across the country so that they can be tested and monitored, so that we can report back to the company that, hey, this did really, really well in the Chicago area, but maybe it didn't do so well in Washington or Oregon. Sometimes they can be really pretty. It's just a place to go visit and look at gardens. And don't think that you crop growers get out of this, because every single one of these plots right here is a different type of soybean. Because new varieties are released every year, and to release them, the growers have to make sure that they're capable of growing in different parts of the country. These are all different types of lettuce. Every row is a different lettuce. So every single crop has these sorts of things. There are roughly 25 varieties of processing tomatoes in the Midwest. There are roughly 50 to 60 grown across the country every year, and that could be different every year, just kind of depending upon the conditions. You can class tomatoes into different types of tomatoes. And how many are there? If you count heirlooms, there's hundreds of them. How many do you really need? I'm not personally a huge tomato fan, so it's hard for me to know exactly how many I need. But lots and lots of people like tomatoes. It's a very popular vegetable. For our row crops, 80% of the wheat in this country is roughly 10 to 20 cultivars. There were 1,000 varieties of alfalfa released in the past 25 years. How many varieties of alfalfa do we need? There are 200 to 300 new cultivars of corn released every year. So these statistics speak for themselves. There's lots of new varieties released every year as we combat new problems, as we invent better plants, taller plants, more well-producing plants, different colored plants, plants for different flavors that people like, different tastes and different flavors in different areas of the country. So a lot of it is very much dependent upon the whims of those of us who are buying these crops for various reasons. Okay, that's it. As always, if you have questions, do not hesitate to get in touch.